Welcome, everybody. Turns out that I'm broadcasting remotely, having a little physical challenge this morning, and am very grateful to have the team with us. Diane and Kirk coming in early, and we've got Michael Gibson here. Before we start, though, I'd like to offer a moment of prayer. Loving and creator God, you fashioned each of us in your image, unique, beloved, and whole. We give thanks for the rich diversity of human love and identity. Bless those whose sexual differences make them feel apart or unseen. Grant them courage to live in truth and surround them with communities of safety and care. Soften hearts that judge or fear, and open us all to deeper compassion that we may see your reflection in every person we meet. May our words and actions bear witness to your inclusive love, and may our churches, families, and hearts be places of welcome, belonging, and peace. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen.
At this point, we'll turn this over to Michael Gibson, who will introduce our speaker.
It's my honor to introduce Reverend Lynette Ross. Lynette has been a dear friend to my daughter Grace, as well as to my family for several years. After a successful career in corporate management, Lynette left to attend Perkins School of Theology at Southern Methodist University, where she earned her MDiv and then entered ministry. She served in several positions, but particularly noteworthy are her time as senior pastor of Cathedral of Hope in Houston, United Church of Christ Church. And after a very brief retirement from that role, Lynette was called to serve as associate pastor of Bearing Church, which is Houston's inner city church that has long maintained an outreach to the LGBTQIA community. Lynette has also served as sabbatical and interim minister at First Congregational Church of Houston, which is another UCC church. Lynette is going to share her insights with us today from her service with congregations that advocate on behalf of the marginalized, underrepresented, or oppressed, as well as the challenges that the LGBTQIA community faces today and what the church can do to support them. So Lynette, it's all yours.
Well, thank you so much. It's wonderful to be with you. And again, I apologize I couldn't be there in person. I want to do a little level setting first on perhaps where I come from and maybe perhaps where all of us come from when it comes to our faith journeys. I'm 76 years old, fast approaching 77. And so when I grew up in the church, I didn't question what I was told. I didn't question what I read. It wasn't, I have become more concerned about equality and seeing people and that as I've gotten older than I did when I was younger. I kind of went along. And I think one of the things that's also true is I grew up in a time when the fact that men were always in charge didn't seem unusual. The truth is, if you look at the Bible, and we all have this same source document that kind of we're coming from, the issue of sexual orientation or diversity or sexuality or gender was never really a prominent topic in the Bible. Whenever it's talked about, it's really not about relationship. It's not about caring. It's not about family. It's typically about power. And that's what I was accustomed to. And the truth is that the Christian church in the United States is still predominantly male-centric. It's still predominantly patriarchal. And I'm part of it. That's the other thing I had to admit was I signed up to be a part of that. And I appreciate that that's a uncomfortable place to be sometimes, that you're a part of a denomination and you love your church, but I'm not crazy about everything they believe in, everything they stand for, and some of the things you read. And so I get that. And so I, don't have always the best collegial relationship with some of my male pastor friends, because we see the world differently. And that's maybe true in your church as well. But Michael said, talk to us about, what it's like nowadays to be, and by the way, I try not to use LGBTQ because I can't say it. So I've started just saying the queer community. Now, my generation does not like that term because it was used as a criticism, but a lot of younger folks use the word queer, and they don't find it problematic. And I think it's easier. It's just one word. There's just too many initials out there for me. And so what do we want what does the queer community want when it comes to church? Here's the other reality. I don't care what denomination, what Christian Protestant denomination you belong to. Every single denomination still struggles on some level and to some degree with the issue of sexuality and gender. There's not a single denomination that across the board, every single member of every single church is in the same place. The only difference I know in the Presbyterian, you've got two big, you got the Presbyterian, you got Presbyterian USA. In the Methodists, they just split, and they've got the Global Methodists and they have the United Methodists. The Episcopal, it depends on which diocese. In the United Church of Christ, we may not have split, but only about 60% of our congregations are what's called open and affirming, because the overarching part of who we are as the UCC is local autonomy and covenantal relationship. And so not every church is open and affirming, but I've obviously always been affiliated with the ones that are. So the truth is that the church still kind of struggles with this. There's no panacea. There's no perfect answer. And so I don't know where Bradley Hills is with it, but it is an ongoing struggle. And what's happening in this country now has just exacerbated it. In 2015, when marriage equality happened, I'll be honest with you, in the state of Texas anyway, the reason that the queer community got in front of the marriage equality issue is because Massachusetts did it. And so we kind of had to go along with it. But to tell you the truth, there are still dozens and dozens of laws on the book in different states that prevent equality. And marriage was wonderful, but in the state of Texas, they can still fire me tomorrow for being gay. We didn't solve that problem. But I can tell you that when marriage equality happened, it happened on a Friday. And the next day was the Gay Pride Parade. And it was downtown, and I was a pastor at the time, and I'm walking, and we turned the corner, and it was probably one of the best nights of my life because the crowd was just so incredibly loud and yelling and screaming for us. It was just incredible. And I thought, I never thought I'd live to see this day, And so to see what's happening now in the country is so disheartening. I've performed several marriages in the last few months. One, hopefully as a protection, because they won't roll back people that are already married. I've married a couple, which is another topic, who are afraid of the one partner being ICE picking him up, hoping that marriage will make a difference, even though he has an immigration status. And so I don't think any of us ever imagined it would be, well, maybe you guys did. I was I guess, naive. Never thought it would be as horrific as it is. And so I can't, I'd love to, I wish I'd been there when your young people talked. It would be interesting. And so I don't know if you want to know what you can individually do or what you can do as a church. I did a little exploring. For example, I can give you an example of some of the things we do here in Houston, the two churches I've been involved with. One of the first ways that a church can let people who are queer know that they're welcome is on their website. But it has to be predominant. It has to be noticeable. I looked at Bradley Hill's website, and if you scroll all the way down to the very bottom, you know, there's a little symbol. It says all are welcome. But in the ministers, the pastor's welcome, he says the word inclusive. But there is not, you would not get an overwhelming feeling that the church is welcoming. You don't get a feeling it's not welcoming, but there's not an enormous invitation that people will be welcome and safe. So I don't know if that's an issue. You know, I don't know that a church can do anything about being more welcoming without the pastor's support. You know, that it's got to really come from the top. You know, I don't know what your social media looks like. You know, that can be a big issue. But because we ask people when they are first-time visitors here, we always say, how did you find us? And they almost without exception say they Googled and they asked for open and affirming, gay-friendly, you know, reconciling. They use just some kind of term about being accepted and welcome. And so we make sure that our website has all the back end voodoo so that we will come up, because usually when you do that, we're one of the top 3 churches that will come up. And so that's something that we do. But the other question, did people want to know about what you can do outwardly, not just in the church, but what can you do in the community? You know, I can give you an idea of some of the things that are possible. And so I don't really know where people are coming from. So I would love to hear from people about what you're interested in, is wanting to know what Bradley Hills can do, or wanting to know what you can do as an individual, or what you can do as a church in the community. So I would love to hear some questions.
Could I add one additional thing? I'd like to know what the denomination is doing. I know they've taken up this issue in various ways, but in your opinion, have we done enough, or I'm sure we haven't done enough. What should we be doing as a denomination?
Yeah, I'm not real familiar with what the Presbyterian USA Church does. You know, we're probably the UCC, United Church of Christ, quite honestly, appears more liberal on a national setting than they do a local. They're very proactive on a national level. And so I don't know what the Presbyterian USA denomination does, but let me say this. Most of the time, when somebody goes to a church or becomes involved in a church and even joins a church, they join that church. They don't necessarily join that denomination, not in their mind. Okay. I mean, they know they're joining the Presbyterian Church, and they know they're joining the United Church of Christ, and we can educate them about our denomination. But the truth is, they joined Bradley Hills because they felt welcomed and cared about there. They, you know, your needs were met there. That's what I find is more and more people are have less loyalty and affinity to a denomination, but they do have it to their local church. And my guess is that's true at Bradley Hills.
My husband and I attended a Presbyterian USA church in this area, a large church. And we specifically went to that one thinking the USA denomination was openly accepting. And what we found out after being there almost a year of attending both virtually during COVID and in person was each particular church got to make that decision. And so we ended up leaving because of that, because we didn't see it or hear it from the pulpit, but then we were in an adult ed class and found out. And we had made the assumption that it was the USA. And then that's how we ended up looking online. And we found Bradley Hills online, and that's been almost 4 years now. But what we since learned under the USA was each specific church. Now, I could be wrong, I'm not an elder, but or minister, but that's what we learned. And that was almost, 4 years ago that we remember reading that.
It's so
I
surprising.
want to say that same thing's true in the UCC.
Okay.
I'm looking at the website and it's under I'm new, and perhaps we need to move this over, but it says it's right after why BHPC. The next big area down is a welcoming community. It welcomes all to worship with us and share the life of Christ together. We're all God's children. And it goes down to LGBTQIA. Persons and their families are most welcome here. BHPC has long been a part of the Covenant Network of Presbyterians. It's a pretty strong statement, but it is under I'm new. So maybe we should move it over to a more prominent place. Because we were pioneers actually in allowing pastors to become part of our church. So, and we fought, you're right in that in the Presbyterian church, it depends on the individual church and the presbytery, but we were sort of ahead of that fight, although that's sort of where things stand. But the covenant, we are a member of the Covenant Network, and we do have that statement. So yeah.
I don't know that you need to move it. My preference is that on the landing page, that there's a rainbow flag,
Okay.
so bam, so they immediately, oh, okay, that's good. And then you can explore with your leadership and your pastor if you want to move that I'm new.
Okay.
But you wanted to just hit them right away. Okay, good. I would think, because if I had been going to Bradley Hills, I would have, I might have come, I don't know, if I would have searched long enough to find that,
Okay.
Because, here's the difference. If you're a part of the straight culture, the culture I grew up in, you're not going to question going to a church. You're going to feel probably comfortable especially if you're white, walking into almost any church there is. But if you're queer, you're going to do some homework before you walk in. You're going to want to be convinced that you're going to be safe. And especially now. Of course, now the issue is not just making it noticeable, I don't know about you, but most of my friends in the queer community want nothing to do with Christianity.
Yeah.
They see us as discriminatory and prejudice and divisive. I mean, they don't have anything good to say. My friends will say that, and I'll go, "Excuse me, I'm like a minister. Did you think that I would belong to a church like that?" And they don't really care. They just don't want to hear it.
Great. And I'm online. I just wanted to say it's interesting to hear all of this, and I can relate to a lot of it. I'll just say that raising a child within Bradley Hills who is queer has been an incredibly affirming experience. And you know, each child is different in the way that they, you know, seek to be accepted, and some seek to be accepted in a more in a less showy way than others, perhaps. And so there's that. And I know that's been a consideration even in terms of the way the church, you know, considers flags and things like that, which you know, I think we need to think about. Um, but you know, I've thought about it recently, and just raising a child who, when you think about a kid's spheres of influence being family and school primarily, and then to have a church be not just sort of a neutral place, but just an incredibly warm, multi-generational source of affirmation, has been really incredibly important to my child. And so, and I think the ways that it's interesting because I think it's very important for the demonstrative show of, you know, inclusiveness. But my experience has been just a very kind of implicit warmth, from, you know, the multi-generational congregation at Bradley Hills. And that's made a huge, huge difference. I mean, we've also had, you know, youth leaders who are queer, and that has been, you know, wonderful for all the kids,
Yeah.
straight and cis and queer. So I think that's been just sort of, some of those things have just fallen into place, somewhat naturally, and somewhat intentionally. But so I think we have definitely more to do in terms of, you know, work within the church, but I'll just raise that flag of gratitude to this congregation.
You know, you're so right. That's why I use the term normalized. That's how I felt here at First Congregational, that, you know, being queer is just not an issue. I mean, you know,
That's a great word. It's just, that's the feeling. Yeah.
yeah, it's not like, you know, they made a point of it, and it's just been so incredibly normalized. It's just, you know, we have like, I think 7 boards, and 5 of them are chaired by somebody who's queer. You know, it's just, well, and their interminister was gay, their former pastor was gay. You know, it's just not been an issue. So I applaud you. And, you know, so it may be more of an issue if you want to try and do something more outward. But the other thing, I don't know what the youth said. The other thing you might ask yourself, if you're interested in, does the church want to support or be involved in organizations in the community that serve the queer community? I don't know if that's something people are interested in. That's always an avenue.
We've done that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have to support the
Yeah.
choir, the Gen Out choir.
Yeah.
Yep.
Al, Ally, would you like to?
No, we've kind of moved on.
Okay, all right.
Well, and the other thing is, there are several, you know, we're just starting in the middle of November, going to start a 5-week Sunday school class on the Bible and homosexuality that's actually being taught by somebody in the queer community here. You know, that's something that some congregations do. You know, there's a plethora of books out there. I can certainly be happy to send a bibliography. You know, that's something to consider. I don't know if you want to be that intentional or if it's even necessary. I think for me, you know, one of the things that you notice on my Zoom, I try and use my pronouns. I try and make it clear what my pronouns are, you know, and as we have more and more kids who are non-binary or who don't think of themselves as either male or female, or they may be transgender and they're transitioning, you know, the use of pronouns is really important. And I appreciate from a grammatical standpoint that it is hard for our generation, but you just have to go with it because it matters. It really is important that the correct pronouns are used. And so I try and I try and be more intentional about that because it doesn't come naturally for me. You know, so
I
that's
think
something.
that's a great point. And what I'm talking about is kind of the normalized sort of feeling like you described. I think the next step is sort of in the same way that we look at internalized racism and so on, is to think about those, that next level of intentionality and self-awareness among hetero and cisgender folks, just to sort of understand. I think from the perspective of youth, sometimes they don't want it to be, I can say from, as a parent of a trans kid, they just want to be the kid, they don't want to be super sort of out there about it necessarily. And so there's that line in terms of, self-education by other adult members and so on, without sort of, I don't know what the word is, making it too big of a deal, being
Yes.
affirming without annoying,
You know this, I mean, it doesn't really matter if the child is transitioning. You know, if you're young, you're never happy when adults make a big deal out of something.
right?
You know, it just,
Right.
you just want to be, you just want to be. And you want to be seen, and you want to be accepted for who you are without any fanfare. It's kind of like, everything's cool. And that's
Right.
hard for us to do sometimes, because we do want to kind of sometimes make a bigger deal out of it but they don't want it, absolutely. So I don't know, Michael, was it?
Yeah, Lynette, I was just, I was, the last time I was here, I was in France for a couple of weeks. But the last time I was here, our speaker was Ryan Burge. And Ryan has got a new book coming out in January called The Vanishing Church. And I was struck by what you said about all of your queer friends aren't interested in church. They don't care about church. And, they sort of look at us all as, bigots or whatever, because partly, I think, because we've been painted with the brush of the intolerant people. And I guess, so anyway, I'm fascinated with Ryan's book, and I can't wait till it comes out. But anyway, I highly recommend it to you as well. But I would be interested in hearing how you think that is affecting that component, I guess, of the church. I mean, I would think that even if there's this sort of local opportunity to not be open and affirming, there are, at least I would assume, that there's a group of, mainline Protestant churches that are. And I'm just curious how, besides, having that approach of being open, how the church can be supportive of that community, and hopefully, ultimately, it will, increase our outreach to them.
I think what the member was talking about, that being normalized and not an issue at Bradley Hills. I think that's the start, is just to everything you do, from your website to the welcoming. Everyone's welcome. You just make it really, really clear. And we also pay attention to the people in your congregation who are queer. What part of the community do they come from? I'm thinking of FCC, and I'm thinking of Bering, which is very much their primary outreach is to the queer community. And I'm thinking of the makeup of their congregation. What we see a lot are, I want to say, people in their from 40 to 60 who, grew up in a church, and but maybe they left the church, but now they want to come back, and they feel safe. We see that demographic. We also see younger families that have children. They're same gender relationships, but either they've adopted or they've given birth to children. We see those families coming in because they want to raise their kids in a community that's safe and welcoming. We don't see a lot of, and then we see younger folks who are non-binary and transitioning, that feel they want to feel safe in the environment, and they have some experience with church, but we don't see a lot of people from the queer community there in their 20s that are single, maybe their 30s. Usually there's some other parameter going on. Either they grew up in a church where they felt loved and cared about, and they'd like to have that again, or they're raising a family and they want to be supported. Those are the two we see the most. And I don't have the answer. I'll be honest with you, Michael. If I knew the answer to keeping the church from vanishing, I would have written that book, and I would be so rich now that it would be unbelievable. But it is an issue. Y'all are facing a stewardship issue because of the shutdown. Bering is facing a stewardship issue because the younger folks that are coming in don't have the financial wherewithal that the declining older generation did with the church. And so that we struggle with that at FCC. Our older generation were the ones who were the best givers because they had the best income. And the younger families, they're getting pulled in 1,000 places financially. And so they don't have the ability. So I don't have the answer, Michael. I wish I did.
Okay. Well, I usually look to you to have the answers, Lynette, so.
But I also think, when we talk to members about doing evangelism, that's a kind of a scary word, because whenever you hear the word evangelism, where we go. We go to the religious right and all of that. And it's unfortunate because it just means to be the church. I think a big part, I think if we leave evangelism or growing our churches up to the pastor or to the website or whatever, I think we're missing out. And I think, studies used to say, I don't know if they still do, that over 85% of people who went to a church for the first time were invited by somebody. And I give an example of two gals that, and I take attendance. It's just the minister in me. Whether I'm in person or I'm online, I take attendance. And because I'm over CE, I'm always looking for the kids. And so 2 weeks ago, I'm watching and I see this precious little girl in this kind of sparkly purple dress, and I pay attention. Well, and then the next Sunday, I was at FCC. It wasn't at Bering, and she was sitting down the row from me. And so I introduced myself and I said, "You wore a sparkly purple dress last Sunday." Well, her two moms were invited by another two-mom couple, because they wanted to take their daughter to a church, and they said, "We have been really welcomed here." And so it's not about, giving a witness for Jesus, or anything like that. It's about, talking to people that you're a part of a community that you really love and you feel cared about and seen and accepted there, and you would love to share it with them. I think we need to be braver about talking about our churches and how much they mean to us.
I wonder if you've seen any social media accounts that do a good job of showing Christianity in an inclusive light. That, I try to follow different accounts that, do a good job and have things that could be shareable. Because I think that's one way, just in the broader community, that we can change perception. I do feel a little cringy about the image of Christians, and one Bradley Hills member asked me at one point, sort of, what can I do to help? And I said, sometimes I can't post too much about trans kids because, again, and I'm saying this just within our community on the call here, I have to be respectful of my own kid, and they're not wanting to be sort of, totally out. But I said to this person, if you see things on Facebook that are supportive of, trans people or, you know, whatever, you're posting that makes a huge difference. And because it gets out to your community. And I feel like that's, just sort of one, not that social media is the answer because it's so often the problem, um, but I wonder if there are social media accounts that maybe do a good job of, I know of Interfaith Alliance in New York is run by a friend of ours, Paul Rauschenbusch, who is a gay minister. And from an interfaith perspective, he speaks out a lot. He speaks out a lot about Christianity, but just something to consider is, all of us taking sort of the chance to evangelize in that media.
Yep. Well, I can tell you, at Bearing Church, there's a gal who actually originally was part of the media team, for the online, but she's pretty skilled when it comes to social media. And I don't know, Diane, who's the senior pastor, she posts like 30-second videos, a lot of them, and they are direct. And that she talks about who that church is and that God loves everybody and everybody's welcome. And so I don't know that it's great that it's the pastor, but not every pastor, that's not in their bailiwick. But those short videos are incredibly effective because, especially because if you have a social media account that maybe starts in Facebook and goes to Instagram, so there's not a lot of print, but those kind of videos are incredibly effective, little short, powerful ones. And maybe there's events that you can support or organizations you can support. Bradley Hills supports XYZ that reaches out to the queer community, that kind of thing. And social media should always be, and you never want to use social media to invite people to events because that can be a little scary. But after the event, if you've done something that's really been welcoming and affirming to any group, whether it's the queer community or the disabled community, whichever, to post that. Bradley Hills had an amazing Pride Sunday, and you show pictures. You pat yourself on the back. And applaud those things. Because your video, I think it's the video or it's somewhere on your website, it shows some people standing at the front of the church. I think maybe they're being received as new members. And I would have guessed that there was a lesbian couple there, and I look for those things, that's what we do.
Allie's got a question.
One resource to share and then a question. As we're talking, it makes me think of my former church in San Francisco, Calvary Presbyterian. It's right in kind of the heart of San Francisco. And they have an incredibly vibrant LGBTQ ministry, and they do wonderful social media around it. So I just sort of offer that as an additional inspiration. I think their Instagram is SF CalPres, but like they did a shirt that said God, the original they, them, and they do a lot of protest and direct action and pride parade. It's very vibrant in that regard. But the question I wanted to ask is about advocacy opportunities with civil society groups that are focused on LGBTQ needs or rights. We heard about Interfaith Alliance, which I admire so much. And I'm just curious, whether you have experience with particular organizations that are going to be receptive to faith support, because we've sort of heard about this, I think, very warranted skepticism that a lot of people in the queer community have vis-a-vis the church. So I'm curious, who are the places that want faith, people of faith to come in and support what they're doing?
You know, it's a very local thing. I can't really necessarily say things on a national level. Because, but I tease, I call it collars up. You know, there are organizations, the Gay and Lesbian GLBT Political Alliance, you know, or caucus, I think it's called. They love to have ministers march and everything, but they always want us to wear our collar. So I'm always teasing it's collars up. But I think there'll be political ones. You know, I don't know if there's a local political organization. I've found them remarkably receptive to having the church be supportive. We have an organization here in Houston called the Montrose Center, which started out as a just as a counseling center, but they're just a multi-million-dollar service organization, and 75% of their client base is LGBTQ, and so you know, Bering bought a table at their gala, and I was able to go. You know, so you have to kind of explore in your own, I think, community where the queer community is being lifted up and supported. I can't think of anything on a national level. The only one that comes to mind is HRC, Human Rights Campaign, and but I don't know that I'd necessarily recommend that.
Do you know if HRC does faith outreach? Because some organizations like that will have a sort of initiative to try to get more clergy, more collars, visibly supporting. Yeah. I don't know if HRC does.
I don't know either. In the past they did, but I don't know if they do. I'll be honest, in Houston, I've never been a big fan of HRC, you know, because it's very their local contingency. On a national level, I don't know.
You know what? I just remembered. I know the answer to this because I know Harry Knox, Reverend Harry Knox, started that. You know, Harry. Now he's retired some years ago, but they did have that at least at one point, a faith initiative.
Yeah, he was, yes, and then I want to say it's back then because he was also the senior minister at as Resurrection MCC here in Houston. That's how I met him.
Ah, wonderful, wonderful leader.
Small world. Yeah, but they did have a faith contingency, and I don't know if they still do. Because, you know, the truth is, and I hate to say this, you know, back in the 70s, we handed Christianity over to the evangelicals when it comes to outward, you know, television, radio, you know, because I sometimes wish we weren't quite as so nice. I wish we weren't so accommodating, and that we kind of were more direct about who we are and what we believe. I think sometimes we've been too polite. Well, I don't know if that's the word.
Yeah.
Lynette, Han has got a question. I want to be sure he gets to ask it. Be sure she can hear you in this microphone. Can you hear him? You may have to get a little closer, Han.
Can you hear me? Yes.
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. Yes, my name is Han, and I'm a seminarian here at Bradley Hills. And let me just say thank you. And I would, you know, of course, aspire to have a fully inclusive, fully affirming ministry in the future. However, this is sort of the, you know, the however part. Just given the reality, I mean, so in terms of our infrastructures, whether it be our website, social media, or speaking of our worship spaces, at least here at Bradley Hills, we have interfaith partnership, which may or may not, you know, sign up with necessarily or have the same inclusive, I guess, ideas or inclusive practices as we do. And I also serve many other congregations in the area, mostly immigrant congregations who would borrow other churches, you know, so, you know, like a traditional, say, PCUSA church would worship there in the morning. And I know of a couple of, you know, immigrant congregations who would come in the afternoon, take down all the rainbow flags and pride flags. Otherwise, they feel like they're not comfortable, right? And I've also been told by many of folks in the community how, oh, they felt like PCUSA were using them as faces of diversity to get to the gay stuff. I mean, I'm just quoting what they said. So I feel like I'm in the middle of and I know this is not healthy, but I feel like I'm in the middle of just being pitted between the queer community and say the immigrant communities, of multinational. I'm not talking about one specific immigrant communities, which I know it really shouldn't be, fighting each other, because we should be supporting each other, especially as those who are oppressed by the systems. So I don't know what your thoughts are in terms of how can we balance that, being, openly affirming and welcoming, and at the same time, I guess somehow being accommodated, like, you just mentioned accommodation. Yeah, I don't know. That's my question. I don't know if that makes sense.
I don't have an easy answer because I hear you. I think absolutely that's true. That those two parts of society, the queer community and the immigrant community, are vastly on different edges. I think you have to continue to be who you are. And the churches that support the queer community have to continue to do that and have to be just as supportive of the immigrant community. And it's okay if people question it. It's okay if they push back. But I think we have to take a stand. I think we cannot back away. And I'm going to keep you in my prayers. That is a hard place to be. It's not comfortable, but I think we have to love them both. And I don't think it's an either or choice. And I think we have to communicate that it's not an either or choice.
Thank you.
I have to make sure I meet him when I come. Okay, Michael?
Okay. All right. She's going to be here in what, February? Probably?
Yeah, I think February.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll try to make sure you and Lynette get to meet. Okay.
Where are you going to seminary?
Union Presbyterian Seminary.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I don't know about
Is that good or bad?
Yeah. Excellent.
Any more questions, comments, concerns?
Over here, Don.
Yeah, we've got one here. Yeah, Don.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, you early in your presentation mentioned the situation that the queer community faces since January 6th. And I wonder if you would address that. It certainly poses a much more difficult, much more serious threat, even to the safety of this community. What should
Yes.
churches do? What should the church in general be doing?
I think if you first of all, I think our greatest concern should be to the young people in the queer community, because I believe that they're at the most risk. And I don't think, as someone my age, I'm at a great risk, I'll be honest with you. But if your church does plan on being more forthright and outward facing as far as support of the queer community, you always have to consider some kind of, you need to have some plan in place if someone tries to come into your church. You're probably talking about that with ICE, what we do that with ICE at churches, what they can and cannot do. So you have to always be careful to make sure you have a plan in place if you're going to be extremely outward focused. But I think the biggest thing is we have to protect our young people, especially those that are transitioning and those that are non-binary, because they're targets. And it's very, very frightening. I don't have an absolute answer, but I think we need to keep it at the forefront that we need to protect them and help them try and be safe. I find it heartbreaking because I think especially for young people who are, I'm talking about under 25, even maybe under 21. I think to find and if they're queer, I think to feel as if they have hope in this country is very hard right now. And I think we have to keep talking to them and keep listening to them and understanding what they're afraid of, if they're able to articulate it, because it would be terrifying.
I'll share, I know two same-sex couples that have migrated or are migrating to Europe, are leaving the country out of fear for their rights. And to me, that's really sobering and just kind of brings home the level of insecurity that people are feeling and the need for outreach, compassion, support.
Yeah, I have several friends, couples that have immigrated, but you know, they're primarily boomers and they have the financial wherewithal to be able to do that. But the younger folks, you know, especially if they don't fit in, you know what I mean? I think we just have to keep keep circling them. We got to circle the wagons and take care of them, and help them feel safe. And pray for the election. I don't know. I'm so stunned by what's happening that I don't have a lot of answers.
I have a couple two comments. First, I think we have to make it clear that God loves everybody.
Yep.
That's important. And two, I think it's important, no matter who we are, if we're witnesses. I mean, the evangelicals have commandeered that term. I'm witnessing, okay, but we are witnesses too. And if we witness love, acceptance, give safe harbor protection to people who in our community, LGBTQ queer folks. For instance, I'm a librarian and I have stood up and we posted drag story hours for families who are who want to support and affirm queer members in the community. We also, it's about being a safe space. So our church is a safe space, but we can also just, you know, speak up if we hear hatred too. I mean, it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yes, and that's where and when you said, you know, we have to make sure we're always saying that God loves everyone, you know, that's where your social media and your website and perhaps what you do inside the church can be so powerful. If that is kind of a primary message, you can't say it too many times, because, you know, you'll find young people who have been you love them, you know, they've been loved by their family, even though they're queer. They've been loved by their church, but they still struggle because they hear so much out there that's opposite. And so I don't think we can tell them too many times.
Yeah. Bridget had made a comment that, you know, that her 82-year-old mother wears a rainbow pin, and you know what? We've got a fair number of those of us who are at the point that they really are not threatened by whatever's going on, so we can make it, but we are honored and listened to, and that's something that we can do. So appreciate that. Yeah.
That's a great idea. Yeah, it's like when I went to the Montrose, the gala, it was a big hotel deal. I still wore my collar because in those public places, it's important. It's when it's an organization that is supporting the queer community, it was important that I be clear who I am.
I think that's
So
true,
absolutely.
and I try to show up, frankly, looking pretty conventional, but with an ally pin or with a message,
Yeah.
to say this is not, it's not fringe. This is a normalized.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah.
Put your pearls on.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are pearls ever out of place? I don't think so. You know,
I don't know.
you guys are wonderful. And I hope you know that you have a great ability to make a difference. I don't think we need to worry. I don't think we need to worry that we can't change the world. But if everybody every day, did wear their ally pin and talked about how God loves everybody, and maybe you do some things in the church, but you just do it every single day. In the aggregate, it makes the difference. And I'll just say one thing that Jane Fonda said. She said, you have to find where you want to non-cooperate. And she gave the example of when they fired Jimmy Kimmel, over 1.5 million people unsubscribed from Hulu and Disney Plus, and it cost them millions. And that's why they brought him back. And so if, we do have the ability to make a difference.
I think it's important that we not give up and that we keep searching, and we're so fortunate to have the benefit of speakers like you who have the experience in a very red place. I haven't asked that question because I'm not sure if there's anything more that we can add to it. But you've got a history of being courageous and service and keeping going. And I think we all have to keep that in mind. We're just very fortunate to have you take the time out of your very busy schedule to foster this conversation. I think this is the kind of thing we need to do to be able to talk. And I will say that at Bradley Hills, we do have a number of youth who have felt very comfortable. And I certainly have never heard anything threatening and nothing else, totally supportive of their voyage and their journey and where they are. So, yeah, but maybe we can't give up. We have to keep thinking about it and reacting because we don't know what next week is going to bring. Last week was pretty bad. So, although we do have something coming next week that I think will be very interesting, and I'm going to go ahead and make the announcement. Next week, we have a special treat on All Souls Sunday. In the second part of a two-part series, one that talked about the women of the 20th century, we have a select group of 21st century men who will share their influences, their influencers, insights, challenges, and experiences with us. And their perspectives will offer a unique and refreshing contrast to those of the last century. Venus Masalam will moderate our panelists, and we'll be listening to and hearing from Cliff Ty, Jeff McCright, Andrew Greb, I'm not sure about his name, I've got to get that down, David Munson. And there will be a question and answer session about that. So we encourage you. And also on this Tuesday, the 28th, there will be an ICPC book discussion on the Undocumented Americans by Carla Conejo Villavicencio. An opportunity, and this is an opportunity to get to know members of BHPC, BJC, and the Muslim community better by reading and discussing this book about this subject. So we have a number of opportunities, but stick with us because honestly, we really are a group, and we can only do it if we continue to meet and come together and ask the honest questions that we have. And we really appreciate your being with us, Lynette.
Well,
And
thank you for
Michael,
inviting me.
Michael, I'm sure you probably have a few more words to say as well.
Yeah, I only have one word to say, and that is that Carol knows what she's talking about with respect to red stuff because she went to Rice. So,
That's right.
so
And yeah, well, and I was born in Abilene,
feels your pain, Lynette.
Texas. If talk about evangelical capitals, that's it. Anyway, so, but thank you so much for being with us. And
bet.
we look forward to seeing everybody next week. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Adios. Thanks, Lynette.
Bye.
See you in February.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you all.
Yeah, thanks.